Straight out the boot room to Wembley, our second home. We come to conquer, no, we never walk alone. We dominate the cream of the crop, drawing all our strength from the roar of the cock. It's all for one and one for all. Pass a move, we're talking total football. Here we go again, Roy's red machine. Liverpool, the greatest team the world has ever seen. Pass a move, it's the Liverpool crew. Pass a move, it's the Liverpool crew. Pass a move, 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 it's the Liverpool crew.
Hello and welcome back to the Liverpool Groove. Today, I am delighted to say that I'm joined by the MP for West Derby since 2019, Ian Byrne. Thank you for joining me, Ian. It's an honour, thank you.
No, it's an honour myself, yeah. Always good to speak to good people.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So, as I say, Ian has been the MP for West Derby since 2019. He's obviously also one of the men behind Fans Supporting Foodbanks, which is been massive for the city in the last nearly decade now. And obviously you're also one of the main people behind the Hillsborough Law. And we'll touch on all of them shortly. So, as I mentioned, 2019 you were elected the MP for West Derby. Did have a few issues in 2022. Your seat was in jeopardy through no fault of your own. What was that like for yourself? Knowing that it was against the wishes of a lot of West Derby residents, what was going through your head at that time?
It's a good question, actually. Yeah, I think it was just a case of fighting, for the seat, because we had a lot of unfinished business. You touched on a few of the things what we're involved in, Right to Food. The Real Truth Legacy project deals with education, but also, what we try to do for the people of, West Derby and beyond, and that sectarian element, which unfortunately is there within the party, was there, and we seen it, and the process that we went through was extremely unfair. Everything around the whole thing was quite unedifying, to be honest, because we believed that we'd done a good job. A lot of people that were speaking to us, and the reflections from across the city and indeed the country was that we've done a good job. And I think what was a little bit soul destroying was that I think in 2021 we'd won MP of the Year. We were the first one MP in the Northwest to win that, and it's not blowing smoke up your own backside. It was a total team, collective effort by everybody involved in the office and people around us. So when you win something like that, and you look at some of the people on it, they were extremely prominent politicians, and I thought that was a nice thing to bring back to West Derby, to bring back to people that the work that we've done has been recognised. So when you get in that position, it was difficult, but thanks to everybody that was around us, the team that we had in place, we eventually overcome the situation and was reselected.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a travesty that you were put in that position to begin with, to be honest. And I think the work that you've done, not only for the residents of West Derby, but the city in general, I think speaks for itself. And I would have been shocked if you never got reselected, to be honest with you. When it was all over, and obviously you did win the vote to continue representing your constituency, what was that feeling like? Was that a big relief at the time?
Yeah, I was just like, it was a relief, but also it was disappointment that we were in that position, and we'd had to waste all that energy and time which we could have been, fighting for the people of West Derby and the city and beyond, on a process which was so flawed, so unfair, and I think it was really, it was just a thing. Yeah, it was just a feeling of, why have we been put through this, but obviously we had done, and we come up the other side. So case of onwards and upwards, really, and focusing on what needs to be focused on, which is, the people of West Derby were struggling. So many of them are struggling so badly, like so many across the country, and trying to throw all your energies into that instead of what we had to throw our energies in for that 3 months. So yeah, it was unedifying. It was something which it's done now. We've moved on. But for me, it was about refocusing all energies on ensuring that all the things that we were starting to put in place, like the Real Truth Legacy project, like Hillsborough Law, working with the Hillsborough Law campaign team, obviously the Right to Food campaign, which we lead on. just making sure that we would be focused on them and pushing them on to even greater heights to ensure that then things come to fruition. So that's obviously what we've been doing.
Yeah. So I mentioned there, obviously you've been running Fans Supporting Foodbanks now for coming up to a decade. As upsetting as it is needing food banks in this day and age, and obviously, I imagine part of you wishes that there wasn't a need for it. But how rewarding is it for you knowing how many people you are helping each and every year?
Yeah, it's sad, part of obviously what we did when we set the organisation up was to say shut us down, and that's that's one of the key tenets. We wanted the organisation to be shut down, and when we started in 2015, to see it grow from a wheelie bin to feeding 100,000 people last year, creating a national network across the country, and then get me being elected in 2019 and being able to lead on it in Parliament. It is quite a story. It know how far we've come, but always mindful of the fact that it's a stick and plaster. Everything we do is a stick and plaster until we get that systemic change, which we desperately need, which is the change in legislation and the right to food. But I'm extremely proud of the people that have been involved in it. Dave, Robbie, Gary Waller, everybody, Paul Kahn, everybody that's really come together, all the volunteers. It's a fantastic group of people that have come together just to push for a better society, really. But what we do is obviously, as I said, and I reiterate, a stick and plaster. And until we get that change in law, that's what we need to do. But even 4 weeks ago on the select committee that I sit on, we had the report on food security, which was a really, really, really important and fine report, to be honest. But I think we were all, quietly proud of the fact that they acknowledged that the mobile pantry model that we've created and use across the city is one of the best ways of obviously applying a stick and plaster in a manner which isn't stigmatising. Working with Everton Football Club, due to work with Liverpool Football Club on one of them as well, and all the other community groups that we work with across the city on doing that is something that we're proud of. But we go back to the fact that we shouldn't have to be doing this. This shouldn't have to be. What we're seeing now is it's a complete and utter breakdown of the welfare net that was so fantastically brought to us in 1945 by the Labour administration, and we're seeing a destruction of that. And when you've got to have hundreds of thousands of volunteers coming together to try and keep people afloat, well, then there's something systemically wrong, and that's why we go back to obviously the need for that systemic change. But rightly so, we're proud of what's being achieved. But also, you look at Manchester City boycotted the Manchester City Food Bank organised a boycott of the Charity Shield match because of the kick-off times and how difficult it was for them to get there, and that was hugely successful. And Dave and Stephen from Fans Supporting Foodbanks went to the actual game and brought donations from Liverpool. So that intercity solidarity which we created through Fans Supporting Foodbanks is a huge part of why we're so proud of what we've done. And obviously we use that to bring forward the better food campaigns, and it's basically making people realise, working class people realise in their communities, that the enemy certainly isn't somebody with a different accent or wears a different colour football kit. And that's obviously how we need to focus minds on.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. I think what I've noticed from seeing Fans Supporting Foodbanks on social media is that other cities have adopted the approach. It's bringing communities together in communities where it's not always been easy to come by. I've seen Glasgow ones, Rangers and Celtic helping each other. It's a bigger thing than football, what you're doing, and I think people need to realise that is like you say. I know when Liverpool or Everton play away at, say, Man City or United, there's a collection going on there for them, for their food bank. So it's not a just us thing. It's everyone. Everyone needs that help, and you're doing as much as you can to try and help as many people, not just in Liverpool but outside of Liverpool as well. So I think it's absolutely commendable, even if we both wish it wasn't something that you had to be doing.
Yeah, it's basic trade union tenants as well. Obviously, me and Dave both work for the trade union as organisers, and it's that, unity of strength, solidarity, not charity message, obviously, which has been hardwired throughout the trade union movement. But also, if you look at the miners' dispute during the 80s, the dockers' dispute in Liverpool during the 90s, people collected food to ensure that then people could stay, fighting the injustices that they were fighting at the time, and them industrial struggles. And, undoubtedly some of the government policies which we've seen, have led to what we're seeing now, which is an explosion in food banks, an explosion in work poverty. 60% of the people that actually come to our pantries across the city are in work. Now, if you're in work and you're using a food bank, you know that the system is completely broken. And we're talking about people from, nurses, police officers, we've got firefighters, we've got public servants who do so much for us, who are actually now having to utilise food banks to stay afloat because of the cost of living crisis and economic system that we inhabit and we live in, which is completely unfair and slanted towards, obviously, the 1%. So it's all, it is about creating that sense of solidarity, community, understanding, and basically, and as I've said that many times, know who your real enemy is, who you really should be fighting. And if you can harness that collective strength of the working class through football, but then and educate on what's actually happening on the ground, and look for solutions, the right to food, and get them behind that, get people behind that. Well, that can only be better for society, because what we have got to do is we've got to hardwire society into a place where it's much fairer and more equitable for so many people, which it isn't now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just it's beyond belief that, as I say, that we have to be like this in this society. And you mentioned people in work, in full-time jobs, having to use food banks, and the system is just broken. I remember when my last office job that I had, we had a mini food bank set up in the office for people, and it just blows your mind that we're in this situation. But I think I think a lot more people are sort of starting to cotton on and change their opinions about a lot of things. And I think, come the next general election, I think a lot of things are going to change, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope. So moving on to the football a little bit, to go from following Liverpool far and wide to, standing in Parliament isn't exactly the normal route most people go down. What made you want to get into politics?
I've been asked this loads of times, and I never wanted to get into politics. It was not something which was on my radar. As I said, I've been many things, from a printer to a taxi driver, to a trade union organiser during my life. So it was not something which politics with a capital P was on my radar. I've been involved in community politics all my life and fighting for a better environment where we lived on a local level. And then I've gone into fan activism, and fighting for the rights of supporters and, cheaper away tickets. One of the greatest achievements during that time, working with the Spirit of Shankly and the Everton and nationally, was obviously the capping of away tickets to £30, which he said couldn't be done, and it was done, and it's still in place now. So, that was sort of like something which you could see collectively you built them alliances that you could actually affect change. And then in 2017, I was asked by Dan Cardney and people at Liverpool Walton, who was standing in that seat, to get involved in his campaign, because I lived in Walton. And I first said no. It was not something that I wanted to do. And, I was highly suspicious of politicians. They always have been, because obviously, growing up in Anfield and seeing what was happening within the area, and it was deeply suspicious of authorities like Liverpool Football Club and politicians, because I didn't feel as though they'd done the best for my area. So it was something which I said no to. And then I've always in the back of my mind had the thought process where can you go and affect the most change for the people who you want to represent. And then, I said, okay, Dan, I'll help you out short term. So we went round, we got him elected, which isn't too difficult in Liverpool, to be honest, as a Labour MP. And then from that, he asked me to become his office manager. So I say I had a fantastic job with United Union. So it was a couple of sleepless nights. And then again, I just thought, well, where can he affect more positive change? Working with Dan, working with the whole political movement. Then, it was Corbyn was in charge. There's things that were getting said, the manifesto, it was still things that I really, really believed in. I thought, what, there's an opportunity here. So worked with Dan then till 2019, and then the MP for Liverpool West Derby, Stephen Twigg, announced he was stepping down. And a number of people got in touch and said, would you consider being the MP? And I said, no, I wasn't interested in becoming the MP, to be brutally honest with you. And then again, you're thinking, well, can you affect change? Could you do a job in that role? And you didn't know if you could. We haven't got that inbuilt sense of old Etonian confidence that you think you could actually go into them places and make a difference. But again, urged by people around the movement to stand and see if it was, you could do what we were trying to do in Liverpool and give people a voice. And I was extremely proud then to obviously get the nomination, get elected in 2019, and then go into Parliament. And it's quite a journey really. But as I said, it was something which was never ever written in the stars for me. It came about through circumstances. You do see people who, from the age of probably 4, think they're going to be an MP, and some of them think they're going to be Prime Minister. To be fair, some of them do end up thinking, that, because that's the pipeline that the country actually delivers. But you see a lot of people who are extremely ambitious with regards wanting to be MPs. And, for me, my advice always when I speak to people is, go out and have a real life, go and experience what's actually happening out in the communities, in your workplace, and then, I feel as though then you're more rounded, and then you can go into that role then.
Yeah. No, like you say, it's quite a journey you've been on, and it goes to show, I think, the power of the people in a way, because without a lot of people imploring you to do these things, you wouldn't be where you are today. So I'm thankful for them people who pushed you to that place, because, as I say, some of the work you're doing is really commendable. So we mentioned Hillsborough Law and the Hillsborough education. I know they're both, very close to your heart. Obviously, I know you were at Hillsborough yourself. For those who might not sort of understand it or understand the need for these things, why are they so important?
Well, we started 2 separate projects. So we started on the Hillsborough Law project. So that came about from Andy Byrne and Steve Rotherham. And that was on the back of Theresa May had asked Bishop Jones, who chaired the HIP, obviously the report in 2012 and the independent panel. So then Bishop Jones went away and wrote up basically from the experiences and what had happened during the process, how we could change legislation really to ensure that something like Hillsborough and the miscarriage of justice that was suffered by these families, survivors, the city, the country indeed, one of the biggest miscarriages of justice ever seen, and justice was never truly served, never will be now. How that can hopefully never ever be replicated again, and no community left will ever serve that. So Andy then produced the Hillsborough Law, which is 2 elements to it to hopefully rebalance the scales of justice and ensure, as I said, that the cover-ups, the smears, the whole process which people went through would never ever be replicated. So Steve and Andy done that, and then in 2017 they both went in to become mayors, so they left Parliament. Then I'm elected in 2019. Andy and Steve have still got that campaign, but the legislation had fell. So it was a case of getting that back within the parliamentary procedures, what we could actually do to implement the law, which had been wrote by Andy, Pete Weatherby, Elkin Abrams, and good people who were involved with Hillsborough had come with that law. So Steve and Andy then in 2020 said to me, obviously we're not in Parliament now, would it be something that you'd consider taking on 2021? So I said, obviously that's I feel as though that's why I'm here. This is a huge part of why I'm here, is to obviously hopefully finish the job that they'd started and get the Hillsborough Law within legislation. All this is happening while we're waiting for the report which I spoke about earlier to actually be implemented or to be adopted by the government. Bishop Jones's recommendations. We're still waiting on that to happen. We're hopeful that that'll happen in October. So then recommendations will be implemented. But we'll see on that. But parallel to that is obviously the Hillsborough Law. How do we get that into legislation? So what we decided to do was form a group, Hillsborough Law Now, which was a huge amount of groups who've been wronged by the state. And I think that's really, really important when you think about the campaign. It's the Hillsborough Law Now, and obviously Hillsborough is synonymous in people's minds. But when you look at, truth about Zane, what that family have gone through, still fight for justice about the death of their young boy, contaminated blood scandal. We're seeing that. We're seeing how the state lied, and how that's turning out. You've got the nuclear test veterans. You've got families who are still fighting for truth and justice around that because of state cover-ups. We've got Orgreave, you've got Hillsborough, you've got Grenfell. So there's so many elements of obviously what's happened and so many other groups involved. Now, the idea was to build a collective to obviously ensure that the legislators thought, well, we'll have to put this into practice. So the success we've had so far is the Labour Party said that they're going to adopt it in its entirety, which is fantastic news, and will be absolutely transformational and be balancing the scales of justice for communities that will face another Hillsborough, because undoubtedly there'll be other disasters moving forward, and the state has shown what they do in these sorts of disasters because we've seen it and we've all lived it and experienced it. So that's a hugely important moment. That campaign carries on to ensure that the Bishop Jones report is implemented, because that is obviously what makes Hillsborough Law, their recommendations. So the fight continues in Parliament. We've just had a joint committee between the Lords and the House of Commons on justice and human rights, and hopefully we'll get a report from that in the coming weeks, highlighting why we need a Hillsborough Law. So it's been a privilege, absolute privilege. I struggle to put into words actually that you're chairing a group. We set up an all-parliamentary group as well called Public Accountability, which is the Hillsborough Law. So we're using every tool we can at our disposal to make sure that it goes on the front foot. And I feel as though that's a huge part of why I'm here. Obviously, was Hillsborough at the age of 16, many family, friends, and we've all lived them experiences. We've all had to deal with what Hillsborough threw at us. But now to have the opportunity as a member of Parliament with them experiences to actually go into these places and make sure that voices are heard, but they'll try to affect change, because the two legacies from Hillsborough now, for me, and speaking to many families and members and survivors, are Hillsborough Law, which hopefully ensure that it doesn't happen again to any other families and survivors of any disaster, and also the education programme, which I'm extremely proud of moving forward, and I'll touch on that now. So the Hillsborough Law, which I've just outlined, I'd say that's one element of the legacy. And then we've got the Real Truth Legacy Project, which has been a real labour of love, really. And again, that's about putting Hillsborough on the national curriculum, because Hillsborough is a national disaster. Everything around Hillsborough should be taught across communities right across the country, from obviously the disaster itself, the effects, the cover up, how the state lied, and it wasn't. It was politicians of all colours lied around Hillsborough and didn't do what was needed to get to justice. So, and then obviously the fight for justice, and obviously what the family, the survivors, and everybody connected to the job that they did. There's a story there which should never ever be forgotten, because for me, it future-proofs future communities, shows them the way of how to fight back against state cover-ups, which Hillsborough was. So I think it's hugely important that that's taught and remembered on a national scale. So we've been working behind the scenes since 2020 to obviously get that sort of like narrative to begin to be spoken. So be meeting meetings with ministers, and and basically what they said to us was, go away and put it together. Get people to put it together, and then obviously we can look at it once it's done in its round. So you do that if you can do that on a local level, and then obviously we can look at it from a national curriculum perspective. So we did that. We took that away, and then what we decided to do was, obviously you had lots of fantastic educators, teachers, people who were doing it right across the country, indeed the globe. So we put a shout out and said, if you've got any lesson plans, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's get everyone's work, and then try and put it together in a fashion to create something which would stand the test of time. Because we've got some fantastic people going into schools, inspirational people who survived, families, but they won't always be here forever. I was 16, I'm 51 now. So what we had to do was do something which we felt as though stood the test of time. So them stories, everything about Hills was not forgotten. So that was really the idea. So we put that shout out, and then what we tried to do from a Real Truth Legacy project perspective was just put it out there, and whoever wanted to get involved, in shaping it. And I wanted obviously families, survivors, educators, people who've done it, people who've been involved, just to try and work together to create something which we all felt would do testament to the families and survivors of Hillsborough, the story of Hillsborough. And it was so important. So we spent 18 months doing it, and it was it's been such quite a journey, to be honest, to get to where we've gotten. When we had fantastic people who were involved around the justice movement. We had survivors. We were lucky to have Professor Phil Scratton, his partner Dean Hayden, who we asked to overlook what was happening from a fact-checking perspective. Couldn't have been there no one better really to do that type of things. And as I said, it was a work in progress. It was a labour of love for a lot of people, but we got there. So we've had 4 trial runs of the assembly, because what we decided was, to begin with, if we have an assembly, which is the gateway into Hillsborough, learning 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and begin to see how that could work. So we had 4 trial runs of the assembly, and we've honed the assembly now to where it was signed off by everybody that was connected to it, and it was signed off by people who mean so much to the Hillsborough movement, to myself personally, and it was done, and then it was delivered by a fantastic woman called Elaine Rees from the Liverpool Learning Partnership, who was with us at the outset when we actually got the idea. And I must say, former Mayor Joanne Anderson and Tom Logan, Councillor Tom Logan, were great as well politically in this as well. So they actually assisted us in giving us resource from the city to pull this together, and then really, really proud that in June it was dropped to all Liverpool City schools and all Liverpool City region education chiefs got it as well to disseminate within Liverpool City region. And Steve Godden's been fantastic on this as well. He's been a real aid and assistance in making sure that obviously he utilised his position to get into the Liverpool City region. So where we are now is, come September, hopefully Liverpool City region schools will be teaching the Real Truth Legacy project. That'll go out. Another fantastic element of it is working with Liverpool Football Club, the foundation, who've said that they obviously want to play a huge part in rolling this out. So they've come in as a collaboration with us, and they're going to assist and work in schools as well and help them to roll the assembly out. Because there's no use having this fantastic assembly and teachers are scared to actually, teach it. So working with the Liverpool Foundation and hopefully Everton as well in the community, and then they'll assist rolling it out through the Premier League and that element of it as well. So it's using every single tool at your disposal. Then obviously now we've done it. I wrote to Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, a couple of weeks ago and said, this is the Assembly, this is what it's done, this is where we're at, and, obviously want to continue working while we've got this government to begin to hopefully get it on the national curriculum, which has always been the aim of this, templated in Liverpool City region, rolling on the national curriculum. So that's been fantastic, and that's now obviously succeeding. We've done what we wanted to do, and that's now gone out. And elements of that as well as, obviously the tragedy chanting, which you may touch on. So, working, obviously being the MP, getting letters, and myself, experiencing it. And, my dad went to Notts Forest. My dad goes home and away. He was at Hillsborough, and, after a Forest game, he really couldn't go another away game last season because it affected him that much. So obviously seeing that, and you're getting lots of constituents writing in, and obviously all the connections that we've got. So we wrote to the Premier League in November, and fair play, the Premier League CEO came back to me, and we had a meeting in November, and we just talked about obviously the tragedy chatting elements of it, but how I believe that education was absolutely fundamental to eradicating the tragedy chanting, which obviously is Hillsborough, but also Munich with Manchester United, Leeds, Istanbul, Bradford fire disaster. You've got all ranges of really offensive, horrific chants that don't support the football team, but are just targeted, obviously, at the supporter base. And you can include, Tottenham into that, the anti-Semitism, Brighton and Chelsea from a homophobic point of view. So there's lots of elements of that where we felt education was fundamentally so important. And obviously I told them about the Real Truth Legacy Project, what we were doing. And fair play to them, nobody went away. They created a tragedy working group, which involved the FA, the Premier League, football clubs, key stakeholders in the game, and Joe Block was on that from the Spirit of Shankly. He was representing the Football Supporters Association, so they've been doing great work over the last 6 months, and I've met them a couple of times. I've done a presentation of the Real Truth Legacy Project just to show them how important education will be in this, because for me, to be nothing more important than somebody in the ground chanting about Hillsborough, and then the son or the daughter saying, well, hang on, Dad, we learned about that in school, or hang on, Mum, you're not right what you're saying there, because this happened and that happened. And I think that was a key part of what we wanted to do and how to influence that. And I think, working with survivors, families, Hillsborough Law Group, everybody connected, what we tried to do was obviously put education in the heart of the solution. And obviously we've had great success now, because they're going to come forward, the Premier League, but they've come forward now with a raft, with the FA, a raft of different measures, potentially. Obviously the education will be at the heart of it, and then obviously the CPS announced yesterday that potentially there'll be charges levied against people taking part as well. But for me, we always wanted the education to be at the forefront of it, because I always thought that if you try to get 6,000-7,000 supporters and start throwing them all out, this is my personal opinion, I thought it would have caused chaos at the game, and it would have made people more emboldened to keep doing it, because then it would have become really adversarial against the police, the clubs, each supporters. And I think we have to draw that poison out of it, and that's why the education element was so important to me. So both of them parallel, but the education elements of it, and that's come from the Real Truth Legacy Project, that's come from that education. And obviously, you fair play to Richard Masters to listening to us from the Premier League, having that conversation, sit me down for an hour, listening to what we have to say, also listening to other key stakeholders, all the Hillsborough Survivors Associations, being in touch with families. So we've listened, and we've got to where we are now. So hopefully next season we'll see an advancement in eradicating that from the game. So, and look, you're utilising the MP position, because, I had a vote to Richard as the cab driver sitting in the stand, when he had the same feelings, I wouldn't have got a response, but because I'm the MP for Liverpool West Derby, I got a response and I got an hour meeting with them. So it's all about utilising the position for the good of people. And obviously, if you're going to touch on Paris, that's exactly what we did with Paris as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's crucial that with all of what you're doing, it was important that people realise that Hillsborough obviously has been the sort of forefront of it, but it's not just about Hillsborough, it's about helping people who've been affected by injustices all over the country. And this is, that's essentially this was the starting point of it. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. You mentioned the tragedy chanting and the education. I think that is vital, because you hear it pretty much every game that we play now, and you'll get people going, "Oh, but that's not about Hillsborough." And it's like, you can't dictate to somebody who was at Hillsborough or affected by Hillsborough that chant wasn't about Hillsborough. And I think that's where the education is crucial, because if they understood why it is about Hillsborough, they wouldn't be chanting what they chant.
Well, a perfect example was the Hillsborough Survivors Association worked with Notts Forest fans and brought them here. And I know Spirit Shankly, and it was so they've done a great job bringing them in light of what I spoke about when my dad went to game at Notts Forest and it was that bad. And some decent Forest fans recognised that. And then anyway, them links were made and they came here. And it was great to see them at the memorial with the banner, and they were really good people. But what was crucial was I was speaking to one of the lads who organised it. His son was 13, and his son was saying that he was singing always the victims, and obviously the whole stadium. I think that's what was so. That's what took me dad's breath away and made it so difficult for them, because that it wasn't in isolation; it was the whole stadium. So when you hear a young lad saying it, and then I said, "Well, what do you think it meant?" He said, "Well, for me, it was about Jurgen Klopp was always moaning on the telly about decisions, so that's what he thought the chant was about." Now, why would a 13-year-old lad know anything about Hillsborough if he hadn't been, it hadn't been touched on in his house or in his school? And that made it even more important what we're doing, because that was a real live example of what we're talking about here. And for me, education's the key, the heart of what we're trying to do. Only on Friday we were at the Communication Workers Union, and a fantastic fella called Brian Parsons, who was a Hillsborough, massive Liverpool fan. Brian goes home and away, and his brilliant team he was working with helped us shape. And Sarah Henny, I mustn't forget, from who works with me, who was a massive part of it as well, shaping an adult education trade union pack, which will go hopefully to all the trade unions, and that's on Hillsborough. It's about the injustices, what we've spoken about, Orgreave, Granfell, and it's about raising the awareness, the truth around Hillsborough. So we've got 6 million trade unionists there, so it's utilising every single thing, from the young kid from Notts Forest to some old gnarled trade unionists who might have these preconceptions, because let's give people a little bit of leeway as well with regards the smear campaign that was run by the state, by the police, by the establishments, by the media, runs deep into people's psyches. It was one of the most effective campaigns that's ever been mounted in the blaming of the Liverpool supporters. And then that's going to take a lot of rolling back, unpicking, and from a societal point of view and a country point of view, ensuring that the truth's out there. Now, we know the truth's out there now, but it's about getting into places to ensure that it's amplified, and that's what we're trying to do. So, yeah, it's a key part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the football then. So, what's your first memory of watching Liverpool?
A young kid sitting in the Annie Road end with my dad. So I lived brought up in Canny Farm, and we had to get the 12 bus and then walk to Anfield, and just seeing it as like a 5-6 year old, 6, just the atmosphere going in, and my half used to sit in the Annie Road end with his mates, or not stand, and then plonking me on a metal bar, and then just seeing this green Oasis and red shirts, and it just overtook my life like so many other people. It just become one of the key focal points of my life, and I fell completely and utterly in love with Liverpool Football Club, and going to the match then. And then when I was age 10, my dad took us from Cancel Farm to Everton Road, and obviously you could walk the ground then. So you go into senior school, and it was a different era then where you could actually pay. You could pay to get in. You could go into you could get into the cop with your mates then, and then obviously it just becomes such a fundamental point to your life, because you go in a game, and then you're building up them circle of friends, and then it becomes, as I said, a key part of your life.
Yeah. What was it like following Liverpool around at the height of the powers in like the 80s under Paisley and stuff like that?
Well, I'm not that old, but I used to go around. I started going probably the away matches with my half fella in the '86 season when we won the double with Dalglish, and going to the likes of Leicester, spoke me Anfield Vapor, one of the great games. Leicester City when Everton got beat by Oxford, who was nipping stuff with Everton, and going to that run up when we won the league, and that's sort of like 13, 14 was when we were starting then, and probably break a taboo here, but we bunked school and we went to Carlisle. Me and my mates at 13, I think 13 or 14 now, Carlisle away. When the FA Cup, so that was like the first time I'd gone with my mates, without my dad, without obviously that circle of friends where he had, and that was an exciting time. It was hairy going to Carlisle with your mate and at 13 and running down, but yeah, it was just, it's like, you speak to anyone, you speak to Steve Morrow, you speak to all that crew, you speak to all the people that go home and away, it becomes just a part of a lot of your life experiences. Obviously come from the matches, and and some of the experiences that you're actually you're encountering along the way. So it's been a massive part of my life.
Yeah. If you had to narrow your memories down of following Liverpool and just being a Liverpool fan, if you had to narrow them down to one happy moment, what would you choose?
Yeah, that's a question, isn't it? The '86 Cup final was probably the greatest game, and then you go to Istanbul, and that was one of the greatest games I've ever been. If you saw the away games, there's been some fantastic moments in my life where I've watched some fantastic performances from, beating Roma when Owen scored, Cardiff. So I think we all I don't think Istanbul can ever be topped, to be honest, ever. Just for everything about it, just everything about it, because they were one of the greatest teams in Europe. One of the most formidable football teams. We weren't by no long stretch the people that we had, but we had some amazing footballers within that team. And I just think the whole thing about it, the half time, you never walk alone. Me mate Paul Kahn saying, support and believe, with the fez on, and that's where the banner comes from in the cop. That's our banner, support and believe. That was Paul saying in half time, support and believe. He's now cheering the spirit of Shankly. And I think if you're going to one moment, I'd have to say 86, even though it was my birthday, we beat Everton, and to win the double, which was some achievements at the age of 14. But I think it'd have to be Istanbul.
Yeah. No, I mean, every time you talk about Istanbul, anytime anyone does, it's just, you look at that team, AC Milan, you look at our team, and still to this day, I find myself just thinking, how did we pull that off? Like, we had no right to.
No, not at all. No, not at all. It was there was something magical about it, which potentially will never be repeated. And I say, being there and experiencing it was a phenomenal feeling.
Yeah, definitely. So this again might be a bit of a tough one for you, but who's the greatest Liverpool manager you've witnessed?
You'd have to say obviously Paisley, because I was there and seeing what we've seen and the teams, and I think you forget how good they were. I was watching. We went to Charity Shields when I think it was 80. I was watching it the other day. It was 80, and I was 8, and my half fellas took me to Wembley for the first time, and I watched the game, was on the highlights of the game, and absolutely magnificent football. So I think I've sometimes been watching some of the older football just to realise what we actually seen, and then obviously Kenny, and one of the greatest teams I've ever seen, 88, 87, 88. So you'd have to say Paisley, but then, you know, Rafa to win the European Cup is some achievement, and obviously now we're living in one of the greatest eras we'll ever see. Certainly in my lifetime, you know, under Jurgen Klopp and what he's created, and the team that he created was probably the best I've ever seen. You know that might be open to debate, obviously, with some of the fantastic teams we've seen in Liverpool, like 78 team, and as I said, 87 team. But I think that can stand amongst them, and it can be a bloody good argument to say that the 218, 219 team, that league winning team, was as good as any team we've seen. And I think with Klopp, we've got 3 more years of him. Just enjoy it. He's going to be rebuilding another team now, and I think what he's done since he's come in is comparable with Shankly. And I didn't mention Shankly because it wasn't my era. I was born in 72, so obviously I never seen Bill. But you know, my half fella might have a different opinion of the ones that were brought around. You know, Shankly obviously so fundamentally important to the club, but so was Paisley. You know, so I think if you're going to ask me to plump for one, I'd have to say, just because of what he won and how he did it and the European success and what he built on, I'd have to say Paisley. But I think we need to look at the end of Klopp's era in 3 years' time, if it does come in 3 years' time, and then we reflect on what he did against the odds, because obviously we'll find out what happens with City. But we know, and even Chelsea are in the flame now, aren't they, for obviously that sort of like financial token. So I think it'll be extremely interesting what happens to City. But you know, City, one of the greatest, if not the greatest football team, regardless of how they've been constructed, with one of the greatest football managers that's ever lived, if not the greatest. So, you know, for Klopp to win the league once and then to be their main competitors for 4 years is some achievement. So let's wait and see. Ask me again in 3 years.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've said it before on the podcast ourselves that it feels like we're getting our own sort of Shankly era with Klopp. I think there's a lot of parallels between the two. You know, I think Klopp just gets us. I think he just gets the City. And it's just, it's been a wild ride, and like you say, we've got at least 3 years left with him, so we've got to just enjoy it.
No, absolutely. During the pandemic, we were having Zooms with him, and he was asking about obviously what was happening with you know, within society, and you know how he could help. And I mean, there's a man who just has got unbelievable principles, and obviously that's reflected on the football pitch. He's just, him and his family, just genuinely good people, aren't they? Regardless of what his football, you know, abilities are as a coach. So I think we're extremely blessed to have somebody that understands the psyche of the City, understands the psyche of the supporters, and understands how to build great football teams. He is potentially once in a lifetime manager. So, and I say this to my kids, to me 2 sons, to my daughter: you just enjoy what you're watching now, enjoy the ride, and let's just see where he takes us, because we're absolutely blessed to have a manager like him. Because you think about some of the ones that we had previous, and I don't want to name people, but you know, 2010 wasn't a glorious era, was it?
No.
Before exactly took over. So I think let's just enjoy it, and because football works in cycles, and obviously now we're in a rebuilding process, and we've got to give the man time and faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So final thing to just touch on before I let you go. Obviously all the work you do in the city, Fans Supporting Foodbanks, the you know, helping your constituents and things like that. We're obviously in a cost of living crisis at the moment. There's people struggling every single day. Not everybody knows how to best deal with that. If you could offer any advice to people who are struggling and maybe not know what to do, what would you say to them?
I think it's about reaching out. Obviously, reach out to, you know, your organisations within there. As I said, you know, we run 6 pantries across the city. There's other people like us, you know. Unfortunately, that's what you've got to resort sometimes to obviously going into pantries, food banks, but also don't suffer in silence. You know, you've got debt. Make sure that you go to debt agencies. Basically, for me, contact someone like me. Make sure that we can signpost people before they get so desperate that something happens, which could be heartbreaking. And collectively, the city comes together, and there's lots of people out there that will give you a touch, will give you a helping hand, will try and assist you out that position that you're in. So just make sure that you speak to people, and as I said, get in touch with people. There's signposts there, so we can just try and get people through. But it's unprecedented what we're seeing now. It's never, within the lifetimes of so many people, we haven't seen what we've seen now. Even during the 80s, you had a welfare safety net. Now you've got it's slowly, well, it's being dismantled. So it's a case of reaching out, making sure that we can do what we can to keep you afloat, and then obviously join the fight back, like a right to food. If you've got that energy to divert into that sort of like saying that society is not fair at the moment. How do we make a more equitable, more fair society? How do we push both this government and potentially future governments into ensuring that the policies that they enable change lives? I was with my great friend, Professor Ian Sinner, from Alderley Hospital yesterday, and we were talking about obviously the effects of poverty on children and how that then goes into the lives moving forward. And that's a huge part of why I'm in this job, is to fight them sort of injustices. So people are out there who are listening, who are struggling, please get in touch with either your MP, councillors, look around the networks that you've got within the city, reach out to them and get help. Do not suffer in silence, because that is the worst thing that can happen, because you don't have to, and there's people out there that help.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Ian, thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're extremely busy, so I really do appreciate you taking the time and highlighting some of these key issues for people.
No, it's been a pleasure. Let's keep up the good work, and let's hope we have a good season. The season starts well on Sunday. I can't believe you haven't asked me about the central midfield.
You know what? I was going to, but I thought we could be here for hours if we start talking about that. So
you'll have a 3-hour podcast, yeah. But let's see what happens Sunday. All right, fingers crossed.
Yeah. No, thanks very much, Ian. Appreciate it.
All right, nice one, Joe. Ta-ra.